Okay, I've had a lot of requests to show how to replace the inside vertical motor on some of these vintage Singer machines. Not the motor that's mounted to the side in the back with a belt that drives the hand wheel. These are internal vertical mounted motors. Singer models 300 through about 700. I don't work on models before or after those generations, so this may work for some of them, but I don't know. So the Singer 301A, 401A, 403A, 404, 411, this is a model 500A, 503A, 600's, and 700's. You don't always need to take off the top cover, but I'm going to for the video. Most of them have a couple of screws. Some have one screw you take out and move the cover forward. This has two screws here I've already loosened, so I'm just going to take the top cover off. I'll show you in here. This is the end of the shaft of the vertical motor. And there's a steel worm gear bolted to that shaft that connects with the fiber gear on the hand wheel. When the motor turns, the hand wheel turns, which is bolted to the shaft, which makes everything move. To take out the motor, you're going to need a screwdriver. You may need a pair of needle nose pliers. And you may need a little mallet or a heavier screwdriver or a wood stick, something to break the motor free if it's really stuck. On all the models, if there's a bottom plate, oil pan, drip cover, you're going to have to take it off. This particular model has a big round nut here that you take off and the metal plate pulls right off. It's the same for 300, 400s, 500s. Some of the 6 and 700s, there's little screws here you loosen and the plastic plate slides to one side and comes off. And here's the motor. This is the bottom of the vertical motor. Now the motor itself is not screwed or bolted to anything. So you may see a couple of screws here. Do not take them off. They're not used to hold the motor in place. They're used to hold the cover over the brushes. So you don't need that. This motor bracket puts pressure on the motor to hold it in place and covers the electrical connections. So you just take your screwdriver and you loosen this nut, screw, pull it out. The cover's going to slip right out like that. Here's the electrical connections from the plug. On these motors there's going to be two wires that connect to the motor that you need to disconnect. These two bottom, they're like hollow brass tubes covered in plastic, and they slip onto brass poles, negative and positive. On the 500 model, this is just held in by pressure and comes right out. Many of them have a couple screws holding them in place. If you want to take this out, go ahead, if it'll give you a better view. There's the two connections to the motor. So if you can get in there and just wiggle that and pull it right off. If you can't get in there with your fingers, you can take a pair of needle nose and grab it, gently twist and pull. So they're not screwed on, they're just pushed on. They can be a little stubborn if they've been on there for years. Now you've got all the wires free of the motor. Sometimes the motor will just pull right out. So I just rehabbed this so the motor's not in there too tight. You can kind of wiggle and pull. See how it's coming out? if it won't wiggle and pull free like this, if it's really stuck in there, then turn it back up and get something you can put in there, a stick and a rubber mallet, or just the stick itself, and pound like this. You don't have to be hard, you just got to break, usually the varnish from the oil is what's holding it in there. When you do that, a lot of times you'll hear the motor drop. When you hear that, flip it back over, and then you should be able to wiggle it and pull it out. And there's the motor. There's the worm gear, the pins. This aluminum shaft goes in a tube up in here, and that's usually what's stuck. People over lubricate these, and the oil and grease and stuff gets down in here and hardens, and that it's stuck in there, and that's usually what you have to break free. That's why sometimes just wiggling the motor a little bit will break it free, and then you can pull it. Sometimes you got to tap it gently with something to get it out. Once you have it out, you can clean it or change it or replace the brushes inside, whatever you've determined. When you go to put it back in, you've got to be sure that the wiring goes underneath that tube. So you can't have the wiring up on top like this, can't have it across, of course. You want it to go around the bottom side of that tube. So I hold it up out of the way a little bit like this and start the motor into the shaft. If you leave the wire down here, sometimes it rubs on the side. So the wire is going to come from the top light, go under that shaft and up. Then just wiggle it up into place, wiggle and push. Sometimes you can wiggle the hand wheel so that the two gears will mesh up in there. If you get to the point where something is stuck, just keep wiggling it and keep trying to push. I think that cord is pinching on it a little bit here. Let's see. Yeah. That's the biggest pain, is that cord. Let's see if I can get it back out of here. Yeah. See if I can keep that wire more on the top while I put it in there. There we go. Slid in all the way that time. Then you can bring that wire to the side here. We're going to put these back on just by pushing them. They just push on. You can wiggle a little and push all the way. Negative and positive. That's it. Then this, again, just on the 500, just sits in here. Sometimes there's screws. Now, I don't know if you can see the motor's tilted a little to the left, so we want to be sure there's clearance here. So just try and make it line up top to bottom. Once you've got it in there all the way and ready to go, you can put your bracket back on. In most of these series, you see the little notch that goes right there. This is going to go under all the wiring. This will go around the plug, and just take your time and line it up there and push it in. Then we'll put the screw back in. Sometimes if you can't get it lined up in there, you can peek right through the side right there, and you can see the end of the bolt to line it up with the hole. So once you get that in there, just take your screwdriver and you want to snug it up good. Don't really crank on it. There's no need for that. Just make sure you've pushed the motor to your right and lined it up. and just snug it up firmly so there's no wiggling. Don't over tighten it. If you don't tighten it enough, when you're sewing it might move around and you'll hear that motor jumping around. So once we get that back together, you want to go ahead and plug it in, and I'm just going to disengage the sewing arm and just run the motor and make sure that it's lined up with the gear and everything's going to work. Yep, looks great. You can take this opportunity to lube those gears if you want. I use a THRU synthetic grease for a number of years now. I find it to be the best. And you don't really want to glob on tons of grease in there. I just took an old paintbrush and trimmed it down a little bit. And I just put a very small amount. And where I'm going to apply it is to this fiber gear on the hand wheel by just, let me get a little more light here. By just lightly brushing the gears a little bit. If you want to put the grease on the worm gear before you stick the motor in, just put it on about the top ½ inch of the gear, because that's all that contacts the hand wheel gear. And again, if you put more than this, it's just going to throw it around in there and attract dirt and dust and make a big mess. So just very small little, about 2 or maybe 3 of those on the whole wheel are going to be enough. Then just run it slowly, or turn it by hand, or run it slowly. You can see that's even a little too much. You can see there's extra grease here, but that'll be okay. So that's it. Then of course put your top back on, and let's just I'll go ahead and re-engage it, and we'll run the whole machine a little bit. That's it. Thanks for watching, and it's a lot easier than you think. Just take your time. If the motor's stuck in there, that's the only difficult thing. Just be patient and tap it out or work it loose. Thanks for watching.